Hey guys, Twigglets2 here. In today's video, I've got my top 10 tips for Humankind. Mostly aimed at beginners, but if you've been playing for a while, I'm sure there'll be a few tips in here for you too. Right at the end of the video, as a little bonus, I'm going to have a comprehensive list of all the various ways of increasing your city cap, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Let's stop talking about it. Let's get into tip number 1. Make sure you get your Neolithic legacy trait before transitioning to the ancient era. If you collect enough curiosities that you get 10 science, you will be offered a legacy trait of either boosting your food, industry, or science. Personally, I like to go for science because I focus so much on food and industry at the beginning of the game. I know that you want to rush up and choose your first culture, but this legacy trait is really worth just getting those extra curiosities for. Always aim to be 1 above your current city cap. It's only a soft cap, and the penalty is a negligible amount of influence. More than 1 starts to become expensive, but always aim to be 1 above because the benefits simply outweigh the penalty. When you first build a city, make sure you build a pottery workshop. It's going to boost your influence, which you're going to need to expand as quickly as possible by building outposts and evolving them into cities. Influence is such a scarce resource at the beginning of the game. The pottery workshop is an essential first addition to your city. To further boost your influence production, in the early game, one of the first civics you are presented with is founding myths. Now, if you select natural right, you'll see that further boosts your influence production. In addition to this, another civic right in the early game, legitimacy. If you select customary laws, that will halve the amount of influence you need to create an outpost. So if you combine the pottery workshop, natural right, and customary laws, you're going to massively fuel your expansion in the early game. Not only that, but later in the game, you can revoke customary laws and enact codified laws instead, which massively reduces the attach outpost and absorb city cost, which is far more useful later in the game. It's a win-win. This one's more of a general point, but it's worth remembering that each culture leaves a legacy trait that stays with you for the rest of the game. It's good to start the game with an industry-focused culture such as the Egyptians, but then it's good to make sure that each legacy trait you choose from then on complements all of the others, so you end up with a very balanced culture by the end of the game. In the early game, you want to be constructing your outposts close to strategic and luxury resources, both of which are very powerful. But if you don't get them for yourself, you're going to have to pay someone to trade for them later. This game really rewards you for expanding quickly and playing wide, so make sure you build as many outposts next to strategic and luxury resources as possible. Once you've constructed an outpost near either a strategic or luxury resource, make sure you build an artisan's quarter before you attach that outpost to a city. You can still build one after you've attached it, but rather than instantly creating it for some influence, you have to add it to the construction queue of that city. It's just a lot more straightforward to spend some influence and build the artisan's quarter straight away, then attach it to the city. Once you've expanded as much as you can, don't forget that you can trade with other empires for strategic and luxury resources you don't have access to. Strategic resources, you don't really have a choice. You need them to unlock technology and units. But even the luxury resources, they are a fantastic source of stability for your cities, so make sure you trade for those as well. When you're in the middle of a battle, if in doubt, set your units to defend. It's not worth giving up a good position just because you feel the need to attack something with every single unit. If you set them to defend, you'll increase their survivability for the next turn. Patience is a virtue. And now, here is my final tip before we move on to my comprehensive guide to increasing your city cap. Try to keep your units out of rivers and stick to the high ground. If a unit's in a river, you'll notice they have a defensive penalty. However, if they have the high ground, they essentially receive an attacking bonus. Now this is worth bearing in mind under 3 scenarios. When you're moving around the map in general, you might get caught off guard, so if you try and stick to these rules, you might be caught less by surprise, and at least not at a disadvantage. But then we have when you're deploying for a battle. You definitely want to make sure you're not starting at a disadvantage by deploying everybody in a river. Avoid them and try and get the high ground where possible. And then the third scenario is when you're actually in a battle. You want to make sure when you have the high ground, you keep the high ground. Don't try and take a cheap shot and then leave all of your troops in a river so they receive that defensive penalty. As promised, here is my comprehensive list of the research, civics and cultures that will increase your city cap throughout the game, as a thank you for sticking around. If you found this video useful, you may want to check out this next video about the 5 easiest mistakes for beginners to avoid in Humankind. Thank you very much. See you next time.